Hi guys, it's Jonathan from Smart Home Sounds, a home audio retailer based in the UK. I hope you're all well. As it's the start of a new year, many people are looking into home renovations and extensions, etc. And with that, they're looking into getting ceiling speakers wired in while the ceilings are open. So in today's video, I'll be walking you through a real client's floor plans, sharing my thoughts out loud so we can give you an idea of what we need to consider when speccing ceiling speakers and whether you would benefit from our free design service and what you might expect from it. Now, before we continue with the speaker specification in this video, it will be based largely around Sonos, as that is what the customer had requested, but we are also official stockists of speakers from brands such as Bowers & Wilkins, Kef, Monitor Audio, Sonance, Bluecube and more, and can help you find the right fit for your project, whether it's Sonos or if you prefer to opt for one of the other brands that we stock. We can also help you choose the right speaker cable and Firehoods, as we are amazed by how many customers get oversold or undersold cable and accessories. Finally, I'm going to be walking you through this plan today, but all of our team go through detailed training and have a lot of experience in this area, so we can all offer the same standard of service to all our customers. So do get in touch if you want to have a chat with a member of the team. Firstly, why would you consider ceiling speakers in the first place? Well, they are aesthetically very appealing, as you don't notice them unless you look up at the ceiling, so they blend completely into the environment. You have more freedom on where to position them and you don't need to find surface space. And of course, if you have kids, there's zero chance of any accidents, so that's all good. If you're looking for more general information about ceiling speakers, then do watch our 3-part video series, which covers different types of ceiling speakers in more detail, which I'll link to below. But for now, let's crack on with this floor plan that I've got. I'll take it slow and we'll keep it simple, but if you have any questions, pop them in the comments below and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. So I've got an example floor plan here that is of a real client's proposed property, and I'll be speaking out loud my thoughts and recommendations for each room and give an explanation as to why I've recommended that. So hopefully you can learn a few things along the way. So from a general perspective, the client knew that they were after a Sonos system, as they were already familiar with how the ecosystem works and they'd like to continue with that. When you're looking to use ceiling speakers with Sonos, you'll need to power the ceiling speakers with Sonos amps. So if we look at this open plan area here, you can see that it is sort of split into 2 different areas. So for the majority of the time, we sort of recommend having a dedicated pair of ceiling speakers for each area. So for larger open plan areas like this, where there are sort of different elements of the same room, like you've got a kitchen area here, you've got a dining area here, and you've got a little seating area here, we tend to recommend having a dedicated pair of ceiling speakers for each area, because how ceiling speakers work is that traditionally they're sold in left and right stereo pairs, so you normally buy them in pairs. And we tend to focus the positioning of each pair of ceiling speakers over the furniture, how the furniture is laid out in the plan. So if we look at this plan, you can see we've got a little kitchen island here. So what I would tend to say is, let me just get my little blue circles out. I'll change that to blue, so I just love blue. Make that a little bit smaller. And this is, I sort of tend to recommend positioning them just either side of the kitchen island if you have one. So I'd maybe do one there, and I'll just copy that and put one the other side as well. So that means that whenever people, when you're cooking, or maybe there might be some bar stools, you'll always get like a left and right stereo separation effect, which is always handy to have because it means that you'll be hearing different instruments and that sort of thing. So that's what I would do for the kitchen. So moving on to the dining room, it's quite similar to how the kitchen is. I would tend to recommend just putting a speaker either side of the dining table, so the width of the dining table, so the majority of people, well in fact everyone, will be able to hear the left and the right equally. So it's going to be a little off center, but that doesn't matter too much. And then the client didn't really need anything in the seating area. But what is good to point out is that if the client did want another pair of speakers here, you can run up to 6 Sonos in ceiling speakers on the same Sonos amp. But if you use different brands of ceiling speaker on the same amp, then you're limited to 4 ceiling speakers. So that would have been a benefit. If the client did want to look into having 6 ceiling speakers, then perhaps I would have said, well, Sonos ceiling speakers would be potentially it would work out more cost effective for them, because they can put all 6 on the same Sonos amp without having to split it up and having 4 on one amp and 2 on another amp. And the amps are $599 each after all. Now this project is actually, this actually contains a vaulted ceiling. So vaulted ceiling means that the ceiling is sort of like a V shape, so it's not flat. So I would have also mentioned to the client that the Sonos in-ceiling speakers have the benefit of being able to offset the angle of the vaulted ceiling by pivoting the driver back down to the floor. Most ceiling speakers, they come with like a pivotable tweeter, which is the little smaller circle in the middle of the ceiling speaker. Now that's usually adjustable, which if you can't afford the Sonos ceiling speakers is a good option to have, and I'd recommend looking for a ceiling speaker with a pivotable tweeter if you've got a vaulted ceiling. So moving on to the living room now. So we initially discussed the idea of having all ceiling speakers in the living room because the client has a TV here, just where the feature fireplace is. And we kind of discussed that while ceiling speakers are great for aesthetic purposes, when we're talking about TVs, they don't offer the best experience possible. So because all of the sound is going to come from above your head rather than at listening height, we tend to recommend keeping ceiling speakers for surround speakers because they do make a really good job of being surround speakers. With the TV, we normally recommend 99 times out of 100 to go for a soundbar because they are custom built for TV. You get more speakers built in. The sound can be separated into different places, and of course, if you're talking about the Sonos Arc, you can unlock things like Dolby Atmos, and also you'll be able to get up to 5.1.2 surround sound. If you just went for an all ceiling speakers approach, the maximum you'll be able to get is 4.1. So it was decided that we'd use in-wall speakers as the rears rather than in-ceiling speakers because the sofa is quite backed up to the wall, and with in-ceiling speakers you'd have to sort of put them directly above your head. With in-wall speakers it would be behind your head, which is a little bit better for getting the most out of the system. You could optionally add a sub as well if you wanted to unlock some extra bass. Now the sub can just be plugged into mains power and it doesn't have to be connected to the Sonos Arc in any way. It will just talk to the Sonos Arc wirelessly. So I'll just draw on the plan just for the client's purposes where the soundbar would go and where the in-wall speakers would go. So I'll do a little blue rectangle there, and then the in-wall speakers, those would be as central to the TV as possible. So you can see it's going to be a little bit off center because this L-shaped sofa, it does make it a little bit less optimal, but it doesn't matter too much. If mostly people are going to be watching from here, I wouldn't say that's an issue. So that's why I position it here. And then again for the other side. So you can see in an ideal world, we'd want to make sure that the soundbar and the rear speakers are sort of equidistant from each other in the right sort of angle. You don't want to make it like that, where that right in-wall speaker is now sort of into the edge of the TV there. You want to make sure it's sort of equidistant. So moving on to the bedroom now. So it was discussed whether we would just go for a Sonos Beam in here rather than a pair of ceiling speakers. We did rest on the idea of having a Sonos Beam only for the TV because not only is it more cost effective, the client's only going to be using the bedroom for TV really. Ceiling speakers, they're not really entirely necessary. They didn't need to go for that aesthetic. But if we took the example of using ceiling speakers, just so I can show you guys how it would work, is we'd normally spec up ceiling speakers and position them sort of at the foot of the bed, so either side of the foot of the bed, because that means that 9 times out of 10 the ceiling speakers will end up being central to the room, and it will fill the room in a nice balanced way. So that's how it would look if I was putting ceiling speakers in there. And then the client looked into the possibility of having one in the ensuite as well. So this is where things get a little bit more tricky, but don't worry, I will explain everything what I mean about that. So going back to the idea of all ceiling speakers being sold in pairs, now there are some ceiling speakers out there that are called single stereo ceiling speakers. So for any rooms that are not practical to have a pair of ceiling speakers in because they're just simply too small and you won't have the ceiling space for them. We tend to recommend the guideline of making sure that they are going to be positioned at least 2 meters apart from each other to get the optimal stereo separation effect. If it's going to end up being less than 2 meters apart, we tend to recommend just going for a single stereo speaker, and that is a single speaker that can still output a left and a right channel. So you're still getting a stereo separation effect, it's just a lesser degree. But it works out much more practical to do that in a smaller area, such as an ensuite. So for the purposes of the plan, what I would normally do is make that circle a different color so that you know that's a single stereo speaker. And a really, really important thing to bear in mind with single stereo speakers is that they will still require 2 cables to be run to that position, because just like a pair of speakers, they have a left and a right, a single stereo has a left and a right as well, so you'll need to wire 2 cables to that position. So I've just put it in a central position in the ensuite for now, but obviously you can change that if you wanted to. The main critical point to mention is that if you're planning to have a ceiling speaker within a shower enclosure or directly above a bathtub, then you will need to make sure that that speaker is waterproof rated. So if it has an IP rating, so something like IP44 is probably the minimum I'd recommend in an ensuite. That's just to cover you for sort of moisture, and when it's close to a water source, you will need to make sure it's sort of waterproof. If it's just going centrally like we have here, then as long as you've got the appropriate ventilation and you've got extractor fans, you open windows occasionally and let the air sort of circulate, then any sort of single stereo ceiling speaker has a degree of steam and moisture resistance in it. So you shouldn't experience any rusting or discoloration over time. It should stand the test of time just by going for a normal ceiling speaker there. So that's why, by keeping the cost down, we can quote for a normal single stereo speaker in the middle of the room there. So just another point to make about the bedroom and ensuite. Now the client didn't necessarily have to have the ability to listen to different music in the bedroom to the ensuite at the same time. So that means that we could quote for the bedroom ceiling speakers and the ensuite ceiling speaker on the same Sonos amp. So that saves us having another Sonos amp, and that would just be called bedroom/ensuite in the Sonos app when you come to name the room. But what is important to know is that you can get something like a speaker switch. So if you wanted the ability to turn off the ensuite audio to the bedroom or vice versa, then you can install a speaker switch. And you can get them for about £69, a 2-way switch, or you can get a 3-way switch. So if you have 3 zones that you want to independently shut off at any one time, then you can get that, and I think it's about £75. So it's not too expensive to be able to do that. So here, that's where we'd normally have that conversation, say, would you like the ability, at least, to turn off the ensuite to the bedroom, and then we'd quote for a speaker switch if you wanted to do so. And that just sort of sits in between the Sonos amp and the ceiling speakers in terms of wiring. Okay, and then the last zone that we had was the balcony. So we've got quite a nice sort of open space here for the balcony. So there's a couple of options if you wanted to get outdoor audio. So the first option is to have like a permanent wall-mounted zone. So that means that you would have another Sonos amp and a set of wall-mounted speakers, which are fully weatherproof, so you can keep them, wall-mounted outdoors all year round. And Sonos do their own outdoor speakers called the Sonos outdoor speakers, and they're optimized for use with the Sonos amp. Unfortunately, you can't do the true play on Sonos outdoor speakers because it can't regulate for the outdoor environment. It would be cool if they could, but they don't. So you've got that option, and that would be a stereo pair. So you'd have, again, like ceiling speakers, a left and a right outdoor speaker. So for the purposes of this quote, I would probably position them either side of these double opening doors here. So they'd probably sit there, and then I'd have another one sort of there. But of course, if the table was going to be over here somewhere, then you might want to put them in these corners. It's entirely up to you. This is just sort of rough at the moment. So there's that option if you wanted a permanent outdoor solution. If you didn't want to have to invest in another amp and another set of outdoor speakers, then Sonos do the Sonos Move, and that is a fully portable, weatherproof wireless speaker that is battery operated. So you can pick it up from its charging dock, and it's got about 11 hours battery life. You can move it from room to room, but because it's weatherproof as well, you can take it outside, and it will fully, withstand all kinds of weathers. I think it's IP56 rated, so it's really well protected against that sort of thing. So because the Move is only $399 and the amp and outdoor speakers would come to, well, it's $599 for the amp and $799 for the outdoor speakers, so you're talking about £1,400 there. So it's quite a difference, but it does depend on whether you want a permanent outdoor solution or whether you're just happy to pick up a portable speaker. And of course, you don't even have to consider the Sonos Move. That's only if you want to integrate that with the indoor zone. So if you want the ability to maybe have the audio playing on the Sonos Move whilst you're outside on the balcony and also in the dining kitchen area when you might be having a party, then that might be really useful to you. But you could just have like a standard portable Bluetooth speaker. It could be like a Marshall Emberton or a little JBL. It's entirely up to you. So there are plenty of options for outdoor audio. All depends on what you want. So obviously I've talked a lot about Sonos in this project because that's what the client was specifically after. But there are plenty of other options available, like multi-room options if you did want to look into those. Now what we would normally say is if you did ask the question, how good does Sonos compare with other multi-room brands, we would say of course there are other options available, but in our experience, we just find that the Sonos app is a little bit more refined. It's a little bit more easier to use than other apps because they just simply have the experience when it comes to designing a multi-room system. Yes, it is a little bit more costly, but it does work really well. Of course, it does depend on your budget. If you can't afford a Sonos system, that's absolutely fine. There are other options like live audio, which do, so if you are interested in ceiling speakers and you like that aesthetic, but you don't necessarily want to have the hassle of wiring everything in and having amplifiers and speaker cable and that sort of thing, you can get live audio all-in-one speakers which just connect to mains power. And there's Bluetooth and Wi-Fi versions. So perhaps if you only had one or maybe two zones, then the Bluetooth would be absolutely fine. But they do a Wi-Fi based option as well. So you would use Live Audio's own app. So again, it doesn't quite work as well as the Sonos app, but it's still perfectly functional, really nice app. And it's a great way of cost saving if you wanted to. So obviously not everything has to be Sonos in ceiling speakers. There are plenty of other brands available like Monitor Audio, Kef and Bowers & Wilkins, and they can all be used on the Sonos amp and you can still benefit from the Sonos app. It all depends on what your personal requirements are. So, if you're only going to be listening to music, sort of ambient to mid-level listening, and then you might not necessarily need the Sonos in ceiling speakers. On the other hand, if you wanted the ability to maybe listen at quite high volumes and you want to entertain, then that's when the Sonos in ceiling speakers can really come into their own. But there are always cost saving options available, so we can always make it work for your budget. So the final thing I just need to make you aware of is Firehoods, and basically what they are, they encase the back of the ceiling speaker and they protect you in the event of a fire. It stops the spread of fire within your ceiling void, which is very important to have, and it is actually a legal requirement if you're installing ceiling speakers where there's a habitable room directly above. Those are the fire regulations. So if you're living in an apartment, then they are definitely required. If you're installing them on a ground floor where there's bedrooms above, definitely install them. But I would always check with your building regulations and sort of err on the side of caution, just to make sure that you don't run into a bit of trouble later on. So that just about shows the sort of thing that we would do if you receive your floor plan. Of course, we can do it together over a phone call, or you're welcome to send in the floor plans to our email address and leave them with us so we can get back to you with a fully annotated layout and an explanation for the route that we've taken. Now, we always base it around your requirements, so we normally ask you to indicate which rooms you're looking to install your audio in, whether there are any TVs that you'd like to integrate, as this would dictate whether it would be more practical to go for soundbars or ceiling speakers, and also whether you intend to use the ceiling speakers for ambient background listening, mid-level listening, or if it's going to be more for entertaining and higher volumes, as we would try and sort of match a suitable ceiling speaker for those requirements, so you don't overspend or underspend. If you're still a bit unsure and want to take it back to basics, we do have a 3-part video series, as I mentioned earlier, on YouTube, And we have also made a free ceiling speaker ebook, which covers all manner of things from choosing the right ceiling speaker, positioning tips, wiring guides, etc. So please email info@smarthomesounds.co.uk requesting one if you would like it to be sent to you. So again, if you're in the planning stages of a ceiling speaker project and you're based in the UK, we'd love to help with your project. Simply get in touch and we can make sure your budget goes as far as possible. I hope you enjoyed watching this video, and as always, if you did, if you could leave a thumbs up, it would really help us out, and consider subscribing if you'd like to see more from us in the future. Take care and all the best.